Here we have the equation of a parabola in standard form, and we are going to rewrite it in intercept form. So the way to do that is we have to factor. So we're going to look at this constant number at the end, which is 12. And we are also going to look at the coefficient of x, which is -8. And we can set up a little diamond puzzle, that's how some people call it, to help us figure out the relationship between these numbers. So we're looking at 12, and we are looking at -8. So we need two numbers, and these numbers have to multiply to 12 and add to a -8. So let's think about numbers that multiply to positive 12, add to -8. So some numbers that multiply to 12 are 2 and 6, actually. Let's start with 2 and 6. And also 4 and 3. So if we think about 4 and 3, yeah, they multiply to 12, but they cannot add to 8. So that won't work. Now 2 and 6 work, right? They multiply to 12. But then if you think about making both the 2 and the 6 negative, they will also add to a -8. So the two numbers we're looking for are -2 and -6. So now that we have our two numbers, we're going to use them for our factoring. So now in factored form, our trinomial is going to become a product of two binomials. And our first binomial is going to be x minus 2. And our second binomial is x minus 6. So this is an equation, so don't forget the y equals. So there we have our equation in intercept form. Now, if you want to check your answer, remember, you can always go back the other way and actually multiply out this binomial. And if you do that, you should get x squared minus 8x plus 12. And that's how you know you were correct. Okay, now let's move on. Let's look at a second example where the factoring is a little bit more tricky. So here again we have the equation of a parabola in standard form, 3x squared minus 13x plus 12. But now the factoring is not as easy because this coefficient on the x squared is not 1. It's bigger than 1. So first thing we're looking, can we factor out 3 from each of our three terms? Our 3x squared, our -13x, and our 12. So you can factor 3 from 12, but the issue is with the 13, right? 13 is a prime number, so I can't factor 3 from it. So what that means is this factoring method is going to require factor by grouping. We're still going to start with that little diamond puzzle. 3 times 12, that's what we got to do. 3 times 12, that's 36. And our middle term is the -13. And so now we're looking for two numbers that multiply to 36 but add to a -13. So let's think about numbers that multiply to 36. So 36, we can think about 2 times 18, but that won't work with 13. We can think about 3 times 12, but that won't work with 13. What else is there? 4 times 9. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. 4 times 9 is 36. And if you think about -4 plus -9, that equals -13. So voila, we found our two numbers, -4 and -9. And so we're going to use those numbers to help us break up the -4 and the -9 to break up this middle term. So instead of -13x, I'm going to think about it as -9x minus 4x. Because if you combine those, you get -13x. But we still have the plus 12, and we still have the 3x squared. And so now we're going to group our first two terms and our second terms. Now do remember this is being added, not multiplied. Okay, so now let's do some factoring. So from 3x squared and 9x, we can factor out a 3x. Okay, so I'm going to write 3x. Now I got to figure out what goes inside the parentheses. So 3x squared divided by 3x is x, and 9x divided by 3x is 3, so that becomes minus 3. Now, moving on to the next binomial, 4x squared and 12. The common factor there seems to be 3, but I also have an issue because in this binomial I have a minus, and here I have a plus. In addition, that 4x is actually negative 4x. So instead of factoring out 3, I'm going to factor out negative 3. Excuse me, not 3, I meant 4. Let's erase that and fix it, right? Because you can't do 4 divided by 3. You can do 12 divided by 3, but not 4. So we're actually going to factor out a negative 4. All right, so when we do that, we get positive x and negative 3. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So, right, we see the common factors of x minus 3. That's really important. So we know one of our factors is x minus 3. Our other factor are the coefficients out here. That would be the 3x minus 4. And so there, we have factored our equation. Last thing is, don't forget it is an equation, so you need the y equals. And there you have it. The parabola here, if you want to rewrite that equation from standard to intercept form, it becomes the quantity of 3x minus 4 times x minus 3.